MK Ultra, the experiment that wasn't supposed to exist. They told him it would help with his anxiety. They gave him what they called medicine. For 77 days straight, they played the same message while he slept. Over and over. 16 hours a day. When he finally woke up, he couldn't remember his wife's name. This wasn't a nightmare. This was a Tuesday at a CIA-funded hospital in Montreal. In 1973, the CIA destroyed thousands of top-secret files. What survived revealed a secret so strange, it sounded like science fiction. This is the story of MK Ultra. In the files, they burned. It's winter in Virginia, January 1973. Snow covers the parking lot at CIA headquarters in Langley. Inside, a man is given an order that will change history. His name is Richard Helms. He's the director of the CIA, and he's about to commit one of the greatest cover-ups in American intelligence history. The order is simple: destroy everything. Every file, every memo, every photograph, every record of a program so controversial, so ethically bankrupt that its very existence could topple the agency. For the next several weeks, shredding machines run day and night. Incinerators burn documents by the truckload. Filing cabinets are emptied, their contents reduced to ash. The program had a code name. 2 letters, 2 numbers, MK Ultra. For 2 decades, the CIA conducted experiments on American citizens, without consent, without oversight, and often without their knowledge. They used drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, electroshock, all in the name of one goal: mind control. And they almost got away with it. But in August of 1977, a researcher doing a routine review of financial records stumbled across something. 7 boxes, hidden in a storage facility, misfiled under budget documents, forgotten during the purge. What was inside those boxes would confirm what many had dismissed as paranoid conspiracy theory. The United States government had been secretly drugging its own people. This is the story they tried to erase. And the fear that started it. The Second World War is over, but peace doesn't last. Within 5 years, a new kind of war begins, a cold one. The Soviet Union swallows half of Europe. China falls to communism. And in America, fear spreads faster than any disease. But it's not just fear of invasion, it's fear of something far more insidious. In 1950, American soldiers captured during the Korean War begin making confessions, on camera, in robotic voices, admitting to war crimes they never committed, praising communism, denouncing their own country. Back home, Americans watch in horror. What's happened to these men? How could soldiers, trained to resist, turn so completely? One word begins circulating in intelligence circles, a word that will haunt American psychology for decades: brainwashing. The term itself comes from Chinese, xinao, literally washing, the brain, and to Americans in the early 50s, it represents their worst nightmare. An invisible weapon that could turn loyal citizens into enemy agents without firing a single shot. April 1950. The CIA receives a report from an agent in Europe. It's marked Eyes Only. The subject line reads, Soviet Capabilities in Applied Psychology. According to the report, Soviet and Chinese scientists have developed techniques to break a prisoner's will, to implant false memories, to turn loyalty into betrayal using nothing but sleep deprivation, drugs, and repetition. The report is alarming, but what truly terrifies the CIA is a series of show trials in Eastern Europe. High-ranking officials, loyal communists who served for decades, suddenly confess to elaborate conspiracies. They speak in monotone. They show no emotion. They seem programmed. the CIA panics. Alan Dulles, who will soon become CIA director, writes a memo. The language is blunt. We are losing the brain war. He argues that if America doesn't develop its own mind control capabilities, it will be defenseless against communist psychological warfare. He warns that Soviet agents could theoretically program American prisoners to return home as sleeper agents, activated by trigger words or phrases. It sounds like science fiction, but in 1951, the CIA takes it seriously enough to launch its first behavioural research program. They call it Project Bluebird. Bluebird's mandate is straightforward. Can we control human behaviour through covert means? Can we make someone do something against their will? Can we erase memories, implant false ones? The initial experiments are crude. Researchers test various drug combinations on volunteer subjects, mostly CIA officers who believe they're helping the war effort. They try barbiturates, amphetamines, and various sedatives. The results are mixed at best. By 1951, Bluebird evolves into Project Artichoke. The scope expands. Now they're not just testing drugs, they're exploring hypnosis, electroshock, and what they call special interrogation techniques. One Artichoke memo from January 1952 asks a chilling question. Can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against fundamental laws of nature, such as self-preservation? The answer, according to the researchers, is maybe. With the right combination of drugs, hypnosis, and psychological conditioning, they believe it might be possible. But Artichoke is still too limited, too cautious, too bound by ethical concerns that slow progress. Alan Dulles wants something bigger, something with virtually unlimited funding and minimal oversight, something that can explore the absolute outer limits of human psychology without restriction. In April 1953, he gets his wish. The program is renamed MK Ultra. The MK stands for mind control, in German, mind control, a nod to the Nazi scientists America had quietly recruited after the war through Operation Paperclip. Ultra is borrowed from the Allied code-breaking operation, a symbol of hidden power that won the war. The initial budget is 6% of the CIA's entire research fund. In today's money, that's tens of millions of dollars. And it's only the beginning. The mission is clear. Develop techniques to control human behaviour, break enemy agents, protect American operatives from foreign brainwashing, and if necessary, create the perfect truth serum. There's just one problem. To test these techniques, they need subjects, human beings to experiment on, and the CIA has no intention of asking for volunteers. Sakane behind the codename meets Sidney Gottlieb, chemist, square dancer, goat farmer, and the man who will orchestrate the most unethical research program in CIA history. To his neighbours in Virginia, Gottlieb is a quiet family man who raises goats and practices meditation. He's a follower of Buddhism, a vegetarian, a lover of nature. He speaks softly, limps slightly from a club foot, and seems utterly ordinary. At work they call him something else, the Black Sorcerer. Gottlieb is brilliant, a graduate of Caltech with a doctorate in chemistry. He speaks multiple languages. He's an expert in poisons, drugs, and biochemistry. He joined the CIA in the late 40s, and by 1953, at just 35 years old, he's running the most classified program in American intelligence. His job is to explore the outer limits of human consciousness, to find ways to manipulate memory, erase identity, and control behaviour. He doesn't see himself as a villain. In his mind, he's protecting America. If the Soviets are experimenting on prisoners, then the United States must do the same, or risk losing the Cold War before it even heats up. This rationalization, this belief that the ends justify any means, will define MK Ultra for the next 20 years. Gottlieb is given almost unlimited authority. He reports directly to Alan Dulles. He has carte blanche to recruit scientists, fund experiments, and test drugs on whoever he chooses. His budget is hidden within the CIA's operational expenses, invisible to congressional oversight, and he chooses people who can't say no. Prisoners, psychiatric patients, drug addicts, soldiers, sex workers, even his own colleagues. The concept of informed consent, a cornerstone of medical ethics since the Nuremberg Code of 1947, is ignored entirely. The Nuremberg Code, established after Nazi experimentation horrors came to light, specifically states that voluntary consent of human subjects is absolutely essential. It states that subjects must have the legal capacity to give consent, must be free from coercion, and must understand the nature and risks of the experiment. MK Ultra violates every single principle. In one early experiment, Gottlieb spikes the punch at a CIA retreat. His own colleagues drink it, unaware they're consuming LSD. One officer, Frank Olson, has a severe reaction. He becomes paranoid, convinced he's going insane. 9 days later, he crashes through a hotel window in New York City and falls to his death. The official story calls it suicide. Olson's family is told nothing about the LSD. They won't learn the truth for 22 years. But Olson is just the beginning, just one casualty in a program that will destroy hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives. Gottlieb's drug of choice is lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. Discovered in 1938 by Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann, LSD is still largely unknown to the public. In the early 50s, Hofmann stumbled upon its effects accidentally, absorbing a small amount through his skin and experiencing what he called a kaleidoscope of colours and extraordinary shapes. 3 days later, he deliberately ingested a tiny dose, just 250 micrograms, thinking it would be a threshold amount. Instead, he experienced the first documented acid trip in history, riding his bicycle home through Basel while the world transformed around him. To Gottlieb, LSD is a revelation. At low doses, it causes hallucinations, euphoria, and heightened suggestibility. At high doses, it can shatter a person's sense of self entirely. Reality becomes fluid. The boundary between subject and object dissolves. Identity itself becomes negotiable. Gottlieb wonders, if you break someone's mind completely, can you rebuild it? Can you erase the old personality and implant a new one? Can you make someone forget who they are and believe anything you tell them? He starts testing. On volunteers at first, mostly CIA officers, who think they're helping the war effort. Then on subjects who have no idea what's happening to them. In San Francisco, the CIA sets up several safe houses. They call the operation Midnight Climax. The setup is simple and disturbing. CIA operatives, primarily a former narcotics officer named George Hunter White, hire women to work for them. These women, often sex workers, promised protection from arrest, lure men from bars and nightclubs to apartments the CIA has outfitted with two-way mirrors and recording equipment. The men are given drinks spiked with LSD. Sometimes the dose is moderate. Sometimes it's massive, 10 or 20 times a normal amount. The men have no idea what's happening to them as reality disintegrates. Behind the mirrors, CIA agents watch and take notes. They observe how the subjects react, how long the effects last, whether the drug makes them more susceptible to suggestion, whether they reveal secrets they'd normally keep hidden, The operation runs for nearly a decade. The men are never told, most never find out. The expense reports for these safe houses list payments for entertainment and hospitality. The apartments are furnished with velvet couches, pornographic art, and fully stocked bars. George Hunter White, the agent running the operation, drinks throughout his shifts and keeps a private stash of drugs for his own use. In one memo, White writes, "I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest? This is the culture of MK Ultra. No rules, no limits, no accountability. But the experiments don't stop at LSD. Gottlieb wants to go further. He tests other compounds. BZ, a powerful hallucinogen that can cause delirium for days. Various barbiturates, amphetamines, heroin, morphine, sometimes in combination. He's searching for the perfect cocktail, the precise mixture that will break down psychological barriers and make someone utterly controllable. He explores sensory deprivation, locking subjects in dark, soundproof chambers for days or weeks. He investigates whether repeated electroshock can erase specific memories. He even looks into more exotic possibilities. Can radiation alter brain function? Can ultrasonic waves influence behaviour? And for the most extreme experiments, the ones that require medical facilities and extended observation, he needs a partner. Someone with academic credentials. Someone who can operate openly in a hospital setting with a veneer of legitimacy. He finds that partner in Montreal. The experiments. The Allen Memorial Institute sits on a hill overlooking Montreal. It's a psychiatric hospital with a sterling reputation. Patients come here hoping for cutting-edge treatment. Some are wealthy, some are referred by their regular physicians. Many suffer from relatively mild conditions: depression, anxiety, postpartum mood disorders. What they get is torture disguised as therapy. The man in charge is Ewan Cameron, a Scottish-born psychiatrist and one of the most respected names in his field. He's past president of the American Psychiatric Association. He's the founding president of the World Psychiatric Association. He testified at the Nuremberg trials, evaluating Rudolf Hess and offering expert opinions on Nazi atrocities. And now, with CIA funding funneled through a front organisation called the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology, he's conducting experiments that rival anything the Nazis did. Cameron has a theory. He believes that mental illness is caused by faulty patterns of thinking, circuits in the brain that have become corrupted. He believes that if you can erase these patterns completely, wipe the slate clean, you can rebuild the mind from scratch and cure any psychological disorder. He calls his technique psychic driving. The process is methodical and horrifying. First, you destroy the patient's existing identity. You do this using a combination of electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation, and drug-induced comas lasting weeks at a time. Cameron uses electroshocks far beyond standard practice. In typical electroshock therapy used to treat severe depression, a patient receives a carefully controlled electrical current that induces a brief seizure. It's done once, maybe twice. The voltage is regulated. The patient is anaesthetized. Cameron does it differently. He uses a technique he calls Page-Russell electroshock, after the two psychiatrists who developed it in England. The voltage is 30 to 40 times the normal intensity. The shocks are administered 2 or 3 times daily, and he does this for weeks, sometimes months. Patients are shocked until they can't remember their names, until they can't recognise their families, until they lose control of their bladder and bowels and regress to an infantile state. Cameron calls this depatterning, breaking down the old patterns. One patient, a woman named Madeline Smith, comes to Allen Memorial suffering from mild postpartum depression. She's a school teacher, married with children. She's seeking help adjusting to motherhood. Cameron gives her electroshock therapy, day after day, combined with extended sleep treatment, where she's kept unconscious for weeks using barbiturates. When she finally wakes, she doesn't know where she is. She doesn't recognise her husband's voice on the phone. She's forgotten how to cook, how to dress herself, how to read. She will spend the rest of her life in and out of institutions, never fully recovering her previous self. Another patient, a man named Leonard Rubenstein, seeks treatment for anxiety and depression. He's a successful businessman. Cameron subjects him to 65 consecutive days of psychic driving. 65 days of being kept in a drug-induced stupor while recorded messages play on a loop under his pillow. The messages are simple phrases. You are confident, you are calm, you are successful, over and over, 16 to 20 hours a day. When Rubenstein emerges, he's docile, compliant, but he's also lost vast sections of his memory. He can no longer run his business. His personality, the thing that made him himself, has been fundamentally altered. The longest recorded session of psychic driving lasts 101 days, over 3 months of continuous psychological assault. Cameron meticulously documents his work. He publishes papers in psychiatric journals. He presents at conferences. He's celebrated as an innovator, a pioneer in the treatment of mental illness. The CIA funds him quietly, through grants that appear to come from legitimate foundations. Cameron doesn't know he's working for intelligence services, or if he does, he doesn't care. He has access to unlimited funding, a constant supply of patients, and complete freedom to experiment. Between 1957 and 1964, hundreds of patients pass through his program. Many are permanently damaged. Some never leave psychiatric care. A few commit suicide years later, unable to cope with the fragmented memories and lost identity. The Canadian government will eventually acknowledge Cameron's crimes. In 1988, they'll offer settlements to his victims, but the amounts are modest and the acknowledgement comes decades too late. But Montreal is just one site. MK Ultra operates in over 80 institutions across the United States and Canada. Universities, hospitals, prisons, military bases, each site conducting its own experiments, often unaware that other sites exist. At the Lexington Narcotics Farm in Kentucky, a federal facility supposedly treating drug addiction, CIA-funded researchers test LSD on inmates. The subjects are mostly black men, already marginalised, already prisoners, already addicted to drugs. They're offered a deal: participate in experiments and we'll give you heroin. Some of these men are given LSD for 77 consecutive days. The doses escalate as their tolerance builds. Researchers want to see what happens to the human mind under sustained massive exposure to hallucinogens. One subject describes the experience years later. I didn't know what was real anymore. I'd see things that weren't there. I'd forget who I was. And then they'd give me more, and it would start all over again. The Lexington experiments run from 1953 to 1975, 22 years of continuous testing on captive subjects. At Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland, soldiers are exposed to chemical agents without being told what they're breathing. The tests are framed as research into protective equipment. Soldiers are told they're helping develop better gas masks, better defences, against chemical warfare. Instead, they're being dosed with incapacitating agents, BZ, a drug that causes hallucinations, confusion, and complete loss of reality orientation. One soldier describes seeing giant rabbits. Another believes his sergeant has turned into a tree. A third attacks fellow soldiers, convinced they're enemy combatants. The effects can last for days. Some soldiers experience flashbacks years later. At least one commits suicide, plagued by recurring hallucinations he can't control. Over 7,000 soldiers participate in the Edgewood experiments between 1955 and 1975. Most are never told what they were exposed to. Their medical records are classified or destroyed. At universities across the country, students are recruited for psychology experiments that are actually CIA tests. At Harvard, a young mathematics student named Theodore Kaczynski participates in a study run by psychologist Henry Murray. The study, funded by the CIA, involves subjecting students to intense psychological stress and humiliation. Kaczynski is berated for hours at a time, his beliefs and personality torn apart by interrogators. The experience, according to later psychological profiles, may have contributed to his eventual transformation into the Unabomber. At Stanford, prisoners participate in what will become a famous psychology experiment. The Stanford Prison Experiment, conducted in 1971, places students in a mock prison environment to study the psychology of power and submission. What's less known is that some of the methodological inspiration comes from CIA-funded research into coercive interrogation. The concept of informed consent, legally mandated since Nuremberg, is treated as an inconvenience. Consent forms, when they exist at all, are vague to the point of meaninglessness. Subjects are told they're participating in research into learning, perception, or mental health. They're almost never told about the drugs, the true purpose, or the potential risks. In one particularly damning document from 1963, a CIA memo discusses the problem of test subjects who might talk. The solution proposed is to use individuals who are expendable, people whose testimony would be easily dismissed. Prisoners, the mentally ill, drug addicts, minorities. It's a deliberate strategy. Choose subjects with no credibility, no resources, no ability to fight back. People society has already forgotten. By the mid-60s, MKUltra has cost millions of dollars. It's tested over 150 separate experiments under its umbrella, each with its own sub-project number. It's involved thousands of unwitting subjects across 2 countries and multiple continents, and it's produced almost nothing useful. No truth serum, no reliable brainwashing technique, no super soldier, no way to make someone do something fundamentally against their nature. What the research shows, consistently, is that human will is surprisingly resilient. You can break someone temporarily, you can cause immense psychological damage, but you can't reliably control someone like a puppet. The mind is too complex, too individualistic, too stubborn. The drugs, LSD makes people unpredictable, sometimes compliant, sometimes aggressive, always unreliable as an interrogation tool. Other compounds have similar problems. Too much variation between individuals, too many side effects, too obvious when someone's been drugged. The hypnosis only works on highly suggestible people, and even then, you can't make someone violate their core values. The idea that you can hypnotize someone and turn them into an assassin, pure fantasy. The sensory deprivation, it causes hallucinations and confusion, but it doesn't produce programmable behaviour. It just breaks people. By 1973, even Sidney Gottlieb admits the program has failed to achieve its primary objectives. the research has branched into increasingly exotic and pointless directions, testing LSD on animals, exploring whether magnets can influence thoughts, investigating paranormal phenomena. The science has been replaced by pseudoscience, and the bodies, literal and metaphorical, continue to pile up. In January 1973, Richard Helms faces a choice. Congressional oversight is tightening. The Watergate scandal is unraveling the Nixon administration. If investigators start looking into CIA operations, they might find MK Ultra, and that cannot happen. Helms orders the destruction of all MK Ultra files, every document, every photograph, every memo. 20 years of research reduced to ash, almost. To the blowback. It's 1975. America is in crisis. President Nixon has resigned in disgrace. The Vietnam War has ended in humiliating defeat. Trust in government is at an all-time low. And then Americans learn that their intelligence agencies have been lying to them about everything. The Church Committee, named after Idaho Senator Frank Church, launches a sweeping investigation into CIA abuses. The findings are staggering. The CIA plotted to assassinate foreign leaders. They conducted illegal domestic surveillance. They opened citizens' mail. They infiltrated anti-war groups and civil rights organisations. But even Church doesn't know about MK Ultra. Not yet. The destruction order had been thorough, filing cabinets emptied, incinerators running around the clock. By all accounts, MK Ultra disappeared completely in 1973. But then, in August 1977, something extraordinary happens. A CIA employee named Robert Lashbrook, different from the Lashbrook who was with Frank Olson when he died, is conducting a routine review of financial records. He's looking for budget discrepancies, tracking money that might have been misallocated, and he finds something strange. 7 boxes, tucked away in a warehouse in Maryland, labelled as financial documents, but stored separately from everything else, filed under the wrong code, marked with project numbers that don't match any active operation. He opens one of the boxes. Inside are receipts, invoices, funding authorizations, all stamped with the same code, MK Ultra. The boxes were supposed to be destroyed in 1973, but someone made a mistake. They were misfiled as financial records rather than operational files. They escaped the purge. Inside those 7 boxes are scattered records of experiments conducted at universities, hospitals, and prisons across the country. It's not comprehensive. It's barely a fraction of the total program. But it's enough. It's enough to prove that MK Ultra was real. In August 1977, the Senate holds emergency hearings. For the first time, the public hears the truth. The testimony is devastating. CIA officials, forced to speak under oath, confirm that yes, the agency conducted mind control experiments. Yes, they used unwitting subjects. Yes, they violated ethical standards. Yes, people were harmed. One exchange becomes infamous. Senator, are you telling me the CIA drugged American citizens without their knowledge? CIA official, after a long pause. Yes, Senator. How many citizens? CIA official. We don't know, Senator. You don't know? CIA official. The records were destroyed. The revelations create a firestorm. Newspapers run front-page stories about CIA drug experiments. Television networks lead with it. The public, already cynical about government, is horrified. But here's what makes the scandal even worse. The 7 boxes that survived represent less than 5% of MK Ultra's total records. Everything else, the vast majority of the research, the full list of test sites and subjects, the complete results, is gone forever. We know MK Ultra ran from 1953 to at least 1973, 20 years. We know it involved over 80 institutions. We know it tested on thousands of people. But we don't know their names. We don't know most of the locations. We don't know the full scope. The personnel files were destroyed. Funding records were routed through shell organisations like the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology and the Geschichte Foundation, fronts that existed only to obscure CIA involvement. Many test sites were never officially documented. Universities that participated received research grants labelled as studies in psychology or pharmacology. The CIA connection was buried so deep that even the researchers didn't always know who was funding them. A professor at a major university might think they're receiving a grant from a legitimate foundation to study learning or perception, completely unaware that the money comes from Langley, and their research is part of a mind control program. Victims come forward, their stories heartbreaking. A woman who went to Allen Memorial for postpartum depression and came out unable to care for her children. A man who volunteered for a Stanford sleep study and spent the next 30 years battling hallucinations. A soldier who thought he was testing gas masks and ended up institutionalized. One woman testifies that her mother, who died years earlier, had been subjected to Cameron's depatterning. She describes visiting her mother in the hospital, seeing her unable to speak, unable to recognise her own daughter. They told us it was part of the treatment, she says. They told us she'd get better. She never did. Another victim, a man who was dosed with LSD at the Lexington narcotics farm, describes the long-term effects. I have flashbacks, still, 40 years later. I'll be driving or sitting at dinner, and suddenly I'm back there, back in that room, and I can't tell what's real. The CIA's defence is consistent. It was a different time, different rules. The Cold War created extraordinary pressures. We thought the Soviets were ahead. We thought we had to catch up. We made mistakes, but our intentions were to protect America. This defence, this appeal to context and patriotism, might have worked if the results had justified the means. If MK Ultra had produced critical intelligence, if it had saved lives or prevented some catastrophe, but it didn't. 20 years of experiments, thousands of victims, and the programme produced nothing of value. No truth serum, no mind control technique, no tactical advantage, just suffering. Sidney Gottlieb, the architect of MK Ultra, is called to testify. He's retired now, living in India, working as a volunteer nurse in a leprosy clinic. He returns to the United States reluctantly. His testimony is brief and largely unrepentant. He defends the programme. He says they were operating in good faith under extreme pressure in an era when the rules weren't clear. He expresses no remorse. We were at war, he says. Different times, different rules. He's never charged with a crime. None of the scientists involved in MK Ultra are prosecuted. The Nuremberg Code, which established clear ethical standards for human experimentation after World War II, should have applied. The experiments violated every principle it established, but the Department of Justice decides not to pursue charges. The reasoning? Classified national security operations, difficulty proving criminal intent, concerns about exposing operational details in open court. The same secrecy that allowed MK Ultra to exist protects those who ran it. Ewan Cameron, the psychiatrist who destroyed minds in Montreal, died in 1967 before the scandal broke. He never faced justice. His reputation, though tarnished posthumously, remained largely intact during his lifetime. His family expresses regret, but faces no consequences. Most of the other scientists involved remain anonymous, their names redacted from declassified documents. They moved on to other government projects or academic positions. Some continued working in intelligence, some became respected researchers in legitimate fields. The institutions that hosted MK Ultra experiments, universities and hospitals, mostly deny knowledge. They claim they were deceived by the CIA, that they thought they were conducting legitimate research. Some of this is true. But some institutions knew more than they admitted. Eventually, the government settles. In 1988, the Canadian government offers compensation to Cameron's victims. Amounts range from 60,000 to 100,000 Canadian dollars. It's something, but it's not nearly enough for lives destroyed, families shattered, decades lost to psychological damage. The United States settles more quietly. Some victims receive payments, most do not. To qualify, you need proof, documentation, evidence that you are part of the program. But how do you prove something that was designed to be invisible? The records were destroyed. The scientists are dead or silent. The institutions deny knowledge. The government claims ignorance. One victim's advocate puts it bluntly. They erased the evidence, then demanded we provide evidence to get compensation. It's a perfect crime. And so the questions remain. How many people were experimented on? What were the true results? What was in the files that were destroyed? How many experiments went unreported? We'll never know. What we do know is this: 7 boxes survived, less than 5% of the records. And what's in those boxes is damning enough to confirm the worst accusations. If the surviving 5% is this bad, what was in the other 95? Operation Midnight Climax, the San Francisco safe houses. Let's go deeper into one of MK Ultra's most disturbing sub-projects, because it reveals the absolute moral bankruptcy at the program's core. San Francisco, 1955. The CIA rents several apartments in Telegraph Hill and North Beach. From the outside, they look ordinary. Inside, they're surveillance laboratories disguised as bachelor pads. The apartments are furnished with velvet couches, mirrored ceilings, erotic art, and fully stocked bars. Behind the mirrors, two-way glass conceals recording equipment and observation posts. Every room is wired for sound. Cameras capture everything. Running this operation is a former Federal Bureau of Narcotics officer named George Hunter White. White is a hard-drinking, rule-breaking agent who sees the CIA's carte blanche as permission to indulge every vice imaginable. He furnishes the safe houses from a special CIA slush fund. He stocks them with expensive liquor. He hires women, usually sex workers who've been arrested and offered a deal, work for us or go to prison. The women's job is simple. Go to bars, find men, any men, bring them back to the apartment, get them to drink. The drinks are spiked with LSD, sometimes moderate doses, sometimes massive amounts. The men have no idea what's happening to them as reality starts to fracture. Behind the mirrors, White and other CIA agents watch. They observe how the subjects react. They take notes on behaviour changes, susceptibility to suggestion, and physical responses. Sometimes they intervene, entering the room to ask questions, to see if the drugged men will reveal personal information or secrets. The operation runs for nearly a decade, from the mid-50s to the mid-60s. Dozens of men, possibly hundreds, pass through these apartments. Not one is told what's being done to them. Not one gives informed consent. Most never find out. George Hunter White keeps a private diary. In it, he writes with disturbing enthusiasm about his work. I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun, fun, fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest? The language is revealing. White sees himself as operating beyond normal morality. The CIA's authority, in his mind, absolves him of ethical responsibility. He can do anything, to anyone, as long as it's in service of the mission. But what was the mission really? What intelligence value came from drugging random men in San Francisco apartments? According to declassified memos, the official justification was to study how LSD might be used in operational settings. Could agents slip drugs to foreign diplomats or spies? Could they extract information from unwilling subjects? Could they compromise enemy agents by recording them in compromising situations? The answer consistently is no. LSD makes people unpredictable. Sometimes they're compliant, sometimes aggressive, sometimes catatonic. You can't control the reaction, and drugging someone in an operational setting is impractical and risky. So why did Operation Midnight Climax continue for 10 years despite producing no useful intelligence? Because no one was watching, because Gottlieb had unlimited authority, because White was having the time of his life, because in the world of classified operations, failure doesn't mean shutdown, it means reclassification and continued funding. The safe houses in San Francisco aren't the only ones. The CIA runs similar operations in New York, in Washington, in other cities. The scope is never fully documented. When the destruction order comes in 1973, most records of these operations vanish. What survives in those 7 boxes are expense reports, receipts for furniture, alcohol, payments to informants. Just enough to confirm the operation existed, not enough to identify the victims. In one memo from 1963, a CIA officer raises concerns. He writes that the San Francisco operation lacks scientific rigour, that the experiments produce no useful data, and that the ethical violations are indefensible. His concerns are noted. The operation continues. This is the reality of MK Ultra. Not a carefully controlled research program with scientific merit, but a sprawling mess of unethical experiments, pseudoscience, and outright abuses, all protected by classification and justified by Cold War paranoia. The international dimension. What other countries were doing, MK Ultra didn't exist in a vacuum. The Cold War created a global race for psychological warfare capabilities, and America wasn't the only country conducting unethical experiments. In the Soviet Union, research into behavioural control was just as aggressive, though far more secretive. The KGB and GRU operated laboratories that experimented with drugs, hypnosis, and what they called psychotronic weapons, devices supposedly capable of influencing brain activity at a distance. One Soviet defector, a scientist named Viktor Sedlecki, claimed in the late 80s that he'd worked in a facility near Moscow, where prisoners were used as test subjects for mind-altering compounds. He described experiments with powerful hallucinogens and incapacitating agents designed for use against enemy soldiers. How much of this was real versus Cold War propaganda is unclear. The Soviet Union certainly researched psychological warfare, but American intelligence used rumours of Soviet capabilities to justify their own programs, and Soviet intelligence did the same in reverse. It was a hall of mirrors, each side claiming the other was ahead, each side using that claim to justify escalation. In the United Kingdom, military researchers at Porton Down conducted experiments similar to those at Edgewood Arsenal. British soldiers were exposed to nerve agents and incapacitating drugs, often without informed consent. One serviceman, Ronald Madison, died in 1953 after being exposed to sarin gas. The Ministry of Defence claimed for 50 years that his death was accidental and unrelated to testing. In 2004, an inquest finally ruled it unlawful killing. France's intelligence services, the SDACE, ran their own behavioural research programmes, though details remain classified. What's known is that French military operations in Algeria during the Independence War involved extensive use of psychological torture and drugging of prisoners. Whether this was connected to formal research programmes or simply operational brutality is unclear. Israel's intelligence services, the Mossad and Shin Bet, developed expertise in pharmacological interrogation, though they've never acknowledged a formal programme equivalent to MK-Ultra. Declassified documents from the 60s and 70s reference special interrogation techniques that almost certainly involve drugs. China, despite being the supposed origin of brainwashing fears, may have been less advanced than American intelligence believed. The techniques used on Korean war prisoners were mostly traditional coercion, sleep deprivation, repetition, and group pressure, not exotic drugs or high-tech mind control. The confessions that so terrified Americans were products of psychological manipulation, not pharmacological breakthroughs. What this suggests is that MK-Ultra wasn't a response to a genuine Soviet advantage. It was a response to fear, rumours, and intelligence failures. The CIA believed the Soviets were ahead in mind control research. They probably weren't. But the belief was enough to justify 2 decades of unethical experiments on American citizens. And here's the truly disturbing part. Even after learning that Soviet capabilities were exaggerated, even after MK-Ultra failed to produce results, the research didn't stop. It evolved. The legacy that never ended. The government says MK-Ultra ended in the late 60s. The files were destroyed in 1973. The scientists moved on. It was a product of Cold War paranoia, and it's over. That's the official story. Here's what the documents actually show. MK-Ultra didn't end, it rebranded. In 1964, while MK-Ultra is still running, the CIA launches a follow-up program called MK Search. The goal is the same: develop methods to control behaviour, extract information, and incapacitate enemies. But the focus shifts. Instead of LSD and psychedelics, MK Search explores toxins, lethal agents, and chemical incapacitants. The research becomes more focused on operational applications rather than pure science. How do you dose someone without them knowing? What drugs cause temporary compliance? What agents can simulate natural death? Sidney Gottlieb runs MK Search just like he ran MK Ultra. Same methods, same lack of oversight, same disregard for ethics. MK Search continues until 1972, when it's officially shut down ahead of the Watergate investigations. But again, shut down doesn't mean the research stops. It means the name changes and the program goes deeper underground. By the mid-70s, behavioural research has shifted to military applications. The US military begins experimenting with techniques to enhance soldier performance and resistance to interrogation. The program is called SEER, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape. CRA training is designed to prepare American military personnel for capture by hostile forces. Soldiers are subjected to stress positions, sleep deprivation, sensory overload, and psychological pressure. The idea is to build resilience, to teach them how to resist interrogation. But the techniques used in SEER training look disturbingly familiar. They're refined versions of methods tested under MK Ultra, the stress positions, the sensory manipulation, the psychological breaking, all have roots in research that began in the 50s. And here's where it gets darker. In the early 2000s, during the War on Terror, SEER techniques are reverse engineered. Psychologists James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen, both former SEER instructors, are contracted by the CIA to develop enhanced interrogation methods for terrorism suspects. The techniques they propose, waterboarding, stress positions, prolonged isolation, sleep deprivation, are directly adapted from SEER training, which was adapted from research into breaking prisoners, which came from MK Ultra. The through line is undeniable. The same tactics the CIA experimented with in the 50s and 60s, the tactics that destroyed psychiatric patients in Montreal and broke prisoners in Kentucky, were codified, rebranded, and used as official policy in the 2000s. When the Abu Ghraib scandal breaks in 2004, when photographs show American soldiers torturing Iraqi prisoners, the public is shocked. But intelligence veterans aren't. They recognise the methods. They've seen them before. One former CIA analyst says it plainly. This wasn't a few bad apples. This was doctrine. These techniques didn't come from nowhere. They came from decades of research into how to break people. In 2014, the Senate Intelligence Committee releases a report on CIA torture. The details are horrifying. Rectal feeding, waterboarding to the point of drowning, sleep deprivation for days, detainees shackled in stress positions until they soil themselves. The CIA defends the program. They claim it produced valuable intelligence, though the Senate report concludes it did not. They say it was necessary, legal, and effective. They say the techniques aren't torture. But medical professionals, human rights organisations, and even some intelligence officers disagree. They point out that the methods cause severe psychological trauma, that information obtained under torture is unreliable, and that the practices violate the Geneva Conventions and the Convention Against Torture. More importantly, they point out that America is using the same playbook it condemned at Nuremberg. The same logic the Nazis used. We were following orders, we were protecting the nation, the ends justify the means, is being deployed to defend American torture. The circle is complete. A program that began with fear of Soviet brainwashing ends with America systematically breaking prisoners using techniques refined through decades of unethical research on its own citizens. And it's still not over. Today the language has changed again. We don't talk about mind control or enhanced interrogation anymore. We talk about psychological operations, perception management, cognitive warfare, information dominance. The Pentagon invests billions in neuroscience research. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, funds cutting-edge experiments in brain-computer interfaces, memory manipulation, and pharmacological cognitive enhancement. One DARPA program, called Targeted Neuroplasticity Training, uses electrical stimulation to accelerate learning. The idea is to help soldiers acquire new skills faster, to reduce training time and improve performance. Another program, Restoring Active Memory, aims to develop neural implants that can improve memory recall. The stated goal is to help veterans with traumatic brain injuries, but the implications extend far beyond medical treatment. If you can enhance memory, can you also suppress it? If you can accelerate learning, can you also implant knowledge or behaviours? The technology that promises to help could just as easily be weaponized. A third program, exploring transcranial magnetic stimulation, investigates whether electromagnetic fields can alter mood, attention, and decision-making. Early results suggest it's possible, at least temporarily, to influence brain activity non-invasively. The research is presented as humanitarian, treating PTSD, helping wounded soldiers, advancing medical science, and maybe that's the sincere intention. But the same technology that treats can also control. One neuroscientist, speaking anonymously, expresses concern. We're developing tools that could fundamentally change what it means to be human, and we're doing it faster than our ethics can keep up. The question isn't whether this technology will be misused. The question is when and by whom. But it's not just the military. The tools of behavioural control have gone mainstream, democratised by technology. Every app on your phone is designed to influence your behaviour. Social media platforms use algorithms optimised for engagement, which means optimised to keep you scrolling, clicking, feeling just enough anxiety or curiosity to stay hooked. The techniques are sophisticated. Variable reward schedules, the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. Social validation through likes and comments, fear of missing out. Algorithmic feeds that show you content calculated to provoke strong emotional reactions. It's not called mind control. It's called persuasive design, engagement optimization, growth hacking. But the goal is the same: shape behavior, control outcomes, keep users coming back. The difference between MK Ultra and modern social media isn't the goal, it's the scale. Instead of dosing thousands of unwitting subjects, tech companies influence billions of willing users. Instead of covert experiments, it's all done openly, with user data harvested and analysed to make the manipulation more effective. And users agree to it, sort of. They click I accept on terms of service agreements that are hundreds of pages long, written in legal language designed to obscure rather than inform. Is that really informed consent? Or is it just a more sophisticated version of the lie told to MK Ultra subjects? One tech ethicist frames it this way: the difference between dosing someone without their knowledge and manipulating them with an algorithm they don't understand is a matter of degree, not kind. Both involve using hidden influence to shape behaviour for someone else's benefit. And then there's surveillance. The erosion of privacy that would have seemed dystopian in the 50s is now accepted as normal. Facial recognition tracks your movements through public spaces. Data brokers compile detailed psychological profiles from your online activity and sell them to anyone willing to pay. Governments use predictive algorithms to identify potential threats before they act. In China, the social credit system uses artificial intelligence to monitor citizens and control behaviour on a national scale. Jaywalking, criticising the government online, or associating with the wrong people lowers your score. A low score means restricted access to travel, education, and employment. It's not hypothetical, it's happening now. Millions of people living under algorithmic social control. In the West, we tell ourselves it's different. Private companies collect the data, not governments. It's used for advertising, not political control. We have privacy laws, regulations, oversight, but the infrastructure is the same. The capability exists. And history shows that once a tool of control exists, it will eventually be used. After the September 11th attacks, the US government dramatically expanded domestic surveillance. The Patriot Act gave intelligence agencies broad powers to monitor communications. The NSA collected phone records on millions of Americans. The justification: national security. When Edward Snowden revealed the scope of government surveillance in 2013, the public was briefly outraged. Then they moved on. Because by then people had already accepted constant monitoring as the price of convenience. Your phone tracks your location, your smart home devices listen to your conversations, your streaming services know what you watch, your search history reveals your fears, desires, and secrets. All of this data is collected, analysed, and used to influence you. Sometimes to sell you products, sometimes to show you political content designed to provoke outrage, sometimes in ways you'll never know. The methods have evolved, the motives haven't. Control, influence, power. What MK Ultra tried to achieve through drugs and electroshock, modern systems achieve through data and algorithms. What Gottlieb pursued in secret labs, tech companies pursue openly with venture capital funding. The tools are more subtle now, more effective, more pervasive. And unlike MK Ultra, there's no clear villain to blame. No single agency running the operation. No Sidney Gottlieb pulling the strings. It's distributed, decentralised, normalised, and that makes it far more dangerous. Because you can shut down a programme like MK Ultra. You can hold hearings, expose abuses, implement reforms. But how do you dismantle a system that billions of people voluntarily participate in? How do you regulate the influence that operates at the speed of data? How do you protect autonomy in a world where behaviour prediction is a $1 trillion industry? We're still living in MK Ultra's shadow. The questions it raised about consent, control, and the limits of governmental power haven't been answered. They've just been reframed for a new technological age. And the uncomfortable truth is this: the experiments never stopped. They just became invisible. Questions that remain. Even after congressional hearings, lawsuits, and decades of investigation, massive gaps remain in our understanding of MK Ultra. The 7 boxes that survived represent less than 5% of the programme's total records. Everything else is gone. Burned, shredded, lost forever. We know MK Ultra ran from 1953 to at least 1973. 20 years. We know it involved over 80 institutions. We know it tested on thousands of people, but we don't know their names. Personnel files were destroyed. Funding records were routed through shell organisations. Many test sites were never officially documented. Universities that participated received research grants labelled as studies in psychology or pharmacology. The CIA connection was buried so deep that even the researchers didn't always know who was funding them. A professor at a major university might think they're receiving a grant from a legitimate foundation to study learning or perception, completely unaware that the money comes from Langley and their research is part of a mind control program. This wasn't accidental. It was designed this way. The CIA created multiple layers of deniability specifically so that if the program was exposed, they could claim ignorance, blame rogue actors, and protect the agency. One shell organisation, the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology, funded research at dozens of universities. On paper, it looked like a legitimate non-profit supporting behavioural science. In reality, it was a CIA front. When investigators tried to trace its funding, they found a maze of intermediaries, each layer obscuring the trail. Sidney Gottlieb retired in 1973, just as the destruction order came down. Convenient timing. He moved to India, worked as a volunteer nurse in a leprosy clinic, and lived quietly for the next 26 years. He gave only one interview to a journalist in the 80s. In it, He defended the programme without apology. We were at war, different times, different rules. He expressed no regret for the lives destroyed, the minds broken, the families shattered. He was never charged with a crime. He died in 1999, at home, surrounded by family. Most of the scientists involved in MKUltra were never held accountable. They moved on to other government projects or academic positions. Their names were redacted from public records. Some continued working in intelligence under new programs. Some became respected researchers in legitimate fields. Their past never mentioned. Ewan Cameron, the psychiatrist who destroyed minds in Montreal, died in 1967 before the scandal broke. He never faced justice. His obituaries praised his contributions to psychiatry. His reputation remained intact. His victims, meanwhile, spent decades trying to put their lives back together. Many never succeeded, and most victims never knew what happened to them. They went to hospitals seeking help and came out broken. They were told they had treatment-resistant depression, schizophrenia, or personality disorders. They blamed themselves. Their families blamed them. The truth that they'd been subjects in illegal government experiments remained hidden for decades. Some victims died never knowing. Others learned the truth too late to seek compensation or justice. One family member describes it this way: "My mother spent 40 years thinking she was crazy. She died believing she'd failed us, that her mind just couldn't be fixed. We didn't find out until after she was gone that she'd been experimented on, that none of it was her fault." In 1995, President Bill Clinton issued an executive order requiring federal agencies to disclose all classified research involving human subjects. The CIA complied, releasing additional documents from MKUltra and related programs. But even those documents were incomplete, entire sections redacted, whole subprojects missing, names blacked out. Investigative journalists noticed gaps in the numbering. MKUltra had at least 150 subprojects, each with its own number, but the declassified documents only account for about 90. Where did the others go? Were they destroyed more thoroughly? Do they involve activities so sensitive they remain classified 50 years later? Or were they never properly documented in the first place? We don't know. And then there's the question no one in government will answer directly. Did it really end? Official statements say MKUltra was terminated, the program was shut down, the research was discontinued, its history, but former intelligence officers tell a different story. One former CIA analyst, speaking anonymously, says programs like that don't just stop. They evolve. They get new names, new funding streams, new classifications. The institutional knowledge doesn't disappear. The scientists don't forget what they learned. The research continues, just under different auspices. Today, the Pentagon's black budget, the portion of defense spending hidden from public view, exceeds $60 billion annually. That's money spent on classified programs that Congress barely oversees and the public knows nothing about. Where does that money go? What research is being conducted? What experiments are happening in laboratories we'll never see? The official answer is national security prevents disclosure. The unofficial answer is we don't know and we're not allowed to ask. What we do know is that DARPA is actively researching brain-computer interfaces, memory modification, and pharmacological cognitive enhancement. The projects are presented as medical research, humanitarian efforts to help veterans and wounded soldiers. Maybe that's true. Maybe the intentions are genuinely good, but the same technology that treats can also harm. The same tools that enhance can also control. And without transparency, without oversight, how do we know where the line is? We don't. Since the Church Committee hearings in 1977, there has been no comprehensive congressional investigation into CIA behavioural research. No follow-up, no systematic accounting, no verification that abuses have stopped. The laws passed after MKUltra are real. Informed consent is required for human experimentation. Review boards must approve research, but these protections depend on enforcement. And when research is classified, who's doing the enforcing? No one. Loopholes exist. National security waivers, classified research exemptions, programs conducted overseas where US law doesn't apply, experiments framed as operational necessity rather than research. One civil liberties attorney, specializing in intelligence oversight, puts it bluntly. The protections we put in place after MKUltra were meaningful, but they assume good faith, transparency, and accountability. In the world of classified operations, none of those assumptions hold. We're trusting the same agencies that ran MKUltra to police themselves. History suggests that's not enough. The victims who came forward, the ones who could prove they were part of the program, received modest compensation. The US and Canadian governments settled claims, paying tens of thousands of dollars in exchange for legal releases. But most victims never came forward. Many didn't know they'd been part of the program. Others couldn't prove it. The records were destroyed. The scientists were dead. The institutions denied knowledge. How do you prove something that was designed to be invisible? You can't. One victim's advocate frames it this way. They erased the evidence, then demanded we provide evidence to get compensation. They classified the program to protect national security, then told victims they couldn't access classified information to prove their claims. It's a perfect catch-22, a perfect crime. And so the questions remain. How many people were experimented on? What were the true results? What was in the files that were destroyed? How many experiments went unreported? How many victims never came forward? We'll never know the full truth. That the best we can do is piece together fragments from survivors, declassified documents, and congressional testimony. But here's what we know for certain. For 20 years, the CIA conducted experiments that violated every ethical principle established after Nuremberg. They destroyed lives, shattered families, and caused immeasurable suffering. They did it in secret, without accountability, justified by Cold War paranoia and the belief that the ends justify any means. They were never held accountable. The perpetrators were never punished. And the infrastructure that allowed it to happen, the culture of secrecy, the lack of oversight, the institutional arrogance, remains largely intact. That's the legacy of MKUltra. Not just the experiments themselves, but the system that enabled them. A system that still exists. A system that could enable similar abuses tomorrow if the right combination of fear and opportunity emerged. What can't be erased? Walk through any city today and you'll see people glued to their phones, scrolling endlessly, clicking without thinking, barely aware of their surroundings. Every click is tracked, every pause analysed. Algorithms learn your patterns, your weaknesses, your triggers. Billions of dollars are spent every year to influence your behaviour, not with drugs or electroshock, with targeted ads, filtered feeds, carefully curated information designed to shape what you think, what you buy, how you vote. It's legal, it's profitable, and it works. Meanwhile, behind classified doors, research continues. Brain-computer interfaces that can read neural activity, drugs that can erase traumatic memories or enhance focus, electromagnetic stimulation that can alter mood and attention. The stated goals are noble: treating PTSD, helping veterans, advancing medical science. And maybe that's the sincere intention of the researchers. Maybe it is, but the tools of healing and the tools of control are the same. The technology that promises to help can just as easily be weaponized. And history shows that once a tool exists, eventually someone will use it. One former intelligence officer, now retired and speaking freely, puts it this way: MK Ultra wasn't an aberration, it was a proof of concept. The question was never if we could control behaviour. The question was how far we could go. And now, with technology we couldn't have imagined in the 50s, the answer is further than anyone realises. When the Church Committee exposed MK Ultra, the public was horrified. The government promised reform, oversight, accountability. Laws were passed, regulations were written, review boards were established, and for a time things changed. Human experimentation without consent became explicitly illegal. Researchers had to justify their work to ethics committees. There were real consequences for violations, but laws are only as strong as enforcement, and classified research, by definition, happens in the dark, behind closed doors, in facilities we don't know about, under programs we've never heard of. The truth is, MK Ultra never really ended. It evolved, the methods changed, the language changed, but the goal remained the same: control. Today, you don't need to drug someone to influence them. You just need their data. You don't need electroshock to break their will. You just need to overwhelm them with information, to flood their attention with content designed to provoke emotion rather than thought. Social media platforms use algorithms refined through billions of interactions. They know what makes you click, what makes you angry, what makes you share. They use that knowledge to keep you engaged, to keep you scrolling, because engagement equals profit. The techniques are sophisticated, variable reward schedules, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. Social validation through likes and comments, fear of missing out, algorithmic feeds that prioritize content calculated to provoke strong reactions, whether positive or negative, because strong emotions drive engagement. It's not called mind control, it's called growth hacking, engagement optimization, the attention economy. But the goal is the same: shape behaviour for someone else's benefit. And users agree to it. They click I accept on terms of service agreements that are hundreds of pages long, written in legal language designed to obscure rather than inform. Is that really informed consent? Or is it just a more sophisticated version of the lies told to MK Ultra subjects? One tech whistleblower, a former engineer at a major social media company, describes it this way: we had meetings where we literally discussed how to make the product more addictive, how to trigger dopamine responses, how to create anxiety that only scrolling could relieve. We knew we were manipulating people. We called it optimization. And then there's surveillance. The erosion of privacy that would have seemed dystopian in the 50s is now accepted as normal. Facial recognition systems track your movements through public spaces. License plate readers record where you drive. Your phone tracks your location constantly. Your smart home devices listen to your conversations. Your streaming services know what you watch, when you pause, what you rewind. Data brokers compile detailed psychological profiles from your online activity. They know your political leanings, your religious beliefs, your sexual orientation, your health concerns, your financial situation. They sell this information to anyone willing to pay. Advertisers, employers, insurance companies, political campaigns. Governments use predictive algorithms to identify potential threats before they act, to flag individuals for additional screening, to determine who gets investigated and who doesn't. In China, this has been systematized into the social credit system. Artificial intelligence monitors citizens and assigns scores based on behaviour. Jaywalking lowers your score. So does criticising the government online or associating with people who have low scores. A low score means restricted access to travel, education and employment. It's not theoretical, it's happening now. Hundreds of millions of people living under algorithmic social control. In the West, we tell ourselves it's different. Private companies collect the data, not governments directly. It's used for advertising, not political control. We have privacy laws, regulations, democratic oversight. But the infrastructure is the same. The capability exists. And history shows that once a tool of control exists, it will eventually be used for purposes beyond its original intent. After September 11th, the US government dramatically expanded domestic surveillance. The Patriot Act gave intelligence agencies broad powers to monitor communications. The NSA collected phone records on millions of Americans without warrants. The justification was national security. When Edward Snowden revealed the scope of this surveillance in 2013, the public was briefly outraged. Then they moved on, because by then people had already accepted constant monitoring as the price of modern life. Your phone tracks your location, your email is scanned for keywords, your browsing history is logged, your social media posts are analysed. All of this data is collected, stored, analysed and used. Sometimes to sell you products, sometimes to show you political content designed to reinforce your existing beliefs or provoke outrage. Sometimes in ways you'll never know. The methods have evolved, the motives haven't. Control, influence, power, what MK Ultra tried to achieve through drugs and electroshock, modern systems achieve through data and algorithms. What Sidney Gottlieb pursued in secret laboratories, tech companies pursue openly with venture capital funding and stock market valuations. The tools are more subtle now, more effective, more pervasive, and unlike MK Ultra, there's no clear villain to blame, no single agency running the operation, no mad scientist pulling the strings. It's distributed, decentralized, normalized, and that makes it far more dangerous, because you can shut down a program like MK Ultra. You can hold hearings, expose abuses, implement reforms, punish perpetrators. But how do you dismantle a system that billions of people voluntarily participate in? How do you regulate influence that operates at the speed of data? How do you protect individual autonomy in a world where behaviour, prediction, is a $1 trillion industry? We're still living in MK Ultra's shadow. The questions it raised about consent, control, and the limits of government power haven't been answered. They've just been reframed for a new technological age. Can you consent to something you don't understand? Can you resist manipulation you can't see? Can you maintain autonomy when every click, every search, every interaction is analysed and used to influence your next decision? The experiments never stopped. They just became invisible. They're woven into the fabric of modern life so thoroughly that we don't even recognise them as experiments anymore. Sidney Gottlieb believed that the ends justified the means, that protecting America required sacrificing individuals, that moral boundaries could be suspended in service of national security. he was wrong. Not because his intentions were malicious, though his actions certainly were, but because that logic, once accepted, has no natural endpoint. There's always another threat, always another justification, always another reason to push boundaries a little further. The victims of MKUltra deserve to be remembered, not just as cautionary tales, but as real people whose lives were destroyed by their own government, people who sought help and were betrayed, people who trusted institutions that lied to them, people who never knew they were pawns, in experiments that served no purpose beyond satisfying curiosity and ambition. Their suffering wasn't an aberration, it was a choice, made by individuals who believed they were doing the right thing, who convinced themselves that sacrificing a few for the many was acceptable, who hid behind classification and secrecy to avoid accountability. And the most disturbing truth about MKUltra isn't what we found in those 7 boxes. It's not the specific experiments or the particular drugs or even the human cost, as tragic as that is. It's how much we still don't know. It's the 95% of records that were destroyed, the test sites that were never documented, the victims who never came forward, the scientists whose names were redacted, the programs that evolved from MKUltra and continue under new names, in new facilities with new justifications. It's the institutional culture that made MKUltra possible, the culture of secrecy, unaccountability, and moral certainty that still exists in intelligence agencies, in militaries, in governments around the world. It's the uncomfortable reality that the tools of control keep getting more sophisticated, more effective, more invisible, while our ethical frameworks and oversight mechanisms struggle to keep pace. The files may be burned, the scientists may be gone, but the legacy of MKUltra is everywhere, in every classified program that operates without meaningful oversight, in every algorithm that manipulates without transparency, in every system that collects data without clear limits on how it can be used, in every justification that security requires secrecy and secrecy requires trust. The most important lesson from MKUltra isn't that government can't be trusted, it's that power without accountability inevitably leads to abuse. That secrecy enables atrocities, that the belief that ends justify means is a road that leads nowhere good. Technology evolves, human nature doesn't. The capacity for cruelty, rationalised by fear and justified by necessity, remains constant. The only defence is vigilance, transparency, and a refusal to accept secrecy as a substitute for accountability. MKUltra happened because good people looked away, because oversight was minimal, because classification prevented scrutiny, because we trusted institutions to police themselves. We can't let that happen again. And yet every day we make choices that move us closer to repeating those mistakes. We trade privacy for convenience. We accept surveillance for security. We allow concentrated power in the hands of unaccountable entities, whether government agencies or tech corporations, because the alternatives seem harder. The truth about MKUltra isn't just historical, it's present, it's ongoing, it's a warning we're still not heeding, and that should terrify us far more than anything Sidney Gottlieb ever did.